Welcome to another episode of Beyond Risk and Back. I'm your host, Aaron Huey. Thank you, parents, for being here and taking your time out of the day to figure out what to do about these kids, these loved ones, these precious children that you have. And it's a struggle. You're trying to figure out what's going on and what you can do differently. Thank you so much, parents, as always, for doing this work with your kiddos. My guest today, as I was doing research on him before the show, the thing that stood out to me most was the mission that he's embraced since he began his path of healing and his realization about the limitations to healthcare to so many people in the world, especially in developing countries. We're going to talk to Matthew about this. My guest today is Matthew Dickson, and his website, mindaid.ca, mindaid.ca. Matthew's story about healing, about how he found his healing process with schizophrenia, one of the scary ones, quite frankly. When we think our children are schizophrenic, or we hear some psychiatrists or psychologists use the word schizophrenia, boy, it even sounds like that death sentence, like borderline personality disorder or ADHD. Only bad things can happen from it. But looking at Matthew's mission, vision, passion, purpose, that is absolutely wrong. So Matthew Dickson, thank you so much for being on Beyond Risk and Back. I appreciate you so much for being here. We got a lot to talk about.
Thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
It is my pleasure. I want to jump right in. How old were you when you were diagnosed with this? How did this come about? What was childhood like? Take us back to the age of the dinosaurs. What was this like? How did this come about?
So I grew up in Eastern Canada in a small town on the seashore, essentially, and I had a pretty average childhood. Nothing too bad or exceptionally good happened to me. It was pretty typical, and I was a straight A student. I went off to university, and that's when some symptoms started to creep in, and I didn't know anything about mental illness. We'd been taught a bit about mental health in health class in high school, but I didn't know anything about depression or anxiety or OCD or antipsychotics, anything like that. So I told some friends about some of the symptoms I was having, or experiences, I guess I would have called them back then. And they said, well, just sort of keep going. And nothing really happened.
What were the symptoms that were showing up?
Well, they were fairly mild. I could still do stuff. I could still get mostly A's in engineering, and I bicycled across Canada. I was on the university rowing team. I did a triathlon, living on my own and doing well financially, at least for a student anyway. And but I had some things creep up, like I was low on energy. My first year of university, my second year, I started to feel more blunted emotionally. My third year, my vision sort of felt like I was seeing things in 2 dimensions, not 3 dimensions. Some people with schizophrenia say it's like watching TV. It's on a TV screen, you can see things happening, but you don't feel like you can interact with them. It's a feeling of being cut off, disconnected. People with other mental illness may describe that too, I think. And I felt in my third year, I felt like I had like a brain transplant. It felt like I had somebody else's brain put into my head, and I was thinking his thoughts, and he was making me say and do things that just weren't me. And I thought, why am I, I'd say something, and inside I'd be thinking, why did I just say that? That's not something I'd even really say. I just felt different. And anyway, when the disease hit, so I was still doing these things. I bicycled across Canada, not feeling the best. But when the disease hit, it hit hard. In a matter of weeks, I went from muddling through life a bit to just at death's door. And I voluntarily went to get help because I started to think about ending my life. And I thought, well, that's not good. So I went to the university health clinic. They took me up to the hospital, the psych ward, and that was my introduction into the mental health system. They tried me on 6 or 7 of the older 1960s antipsychotics. None of them worked for me. And then I tried one that had just come out that year in 1994. And this was when I was 22. And it worked, and I stayed on it, and I'm still on it today. And yeah.
Do you attribute the discovery and taking of that med to the success, or did you supplement this with therapeutic intervention, exercise? Was it just the pills, or were there some skills involved as well?
It's very confusing to get the disease. There was hardly any literature about schizophrenia. I find even today in 2023, there is still not a ton of literature on it. I started reading books in 2000. So 6 years into my recovery, I started reading books on how to get myself better. It took that long. I don't know why. I should have
Wow.
walked into the bookstore years earlier. Once I was in there, I was like, man, I should have done this earlier. But medication helped me. I went to get counseling. I went to counseling for like 7 years or something, once a week. And other than that, I tried to live a healthy lifestyle. I wished I could have kept up my exercise. I just couldn't. I could walk. That was one of the few things I could do. And in the early years of my recovery, I walked a lot. I wish I could have gone to the gym regularly, worked out, done long bike rides and runs regularly, but I didn't have it in me. There is a magazine in Canada, or there was, called Schizophrenia Digest. And on one of the covers, it had this guy with schizophrenia, and he was a competitive cyclist with schizophrenia. And it showed him going around this corner on his bike with all his cycling gear on. And I'm like, wow, how do you do that? I just couldn't. So it is possible. People he trained regularly and went to events. And like, anyway, I was jealous.
Yeah, you described the experience of that disassociative feeling, the two-dimensional thing, in a way that I've not heard this described. How did that look to other people? What were other people seeing, or were you able to hide this from others other than to tell them what was going on? Would they have known?
A lady saw me at my worst in 1994, and she said I looked like I was walking through a world of flying glass. And I'm like, yeah, that's what it felt like. It felt like every step could be my last. It literally felt like I was walking through a world of shrapnel flying at me, bombs being thrown at me, rifles being fired at me. I was never paranoid. I knew I was just walking down the street. It's a nice, normal, sunny day, nothing to be alarmed about. But every step was like that all day long. Just sitting in a chair, I felt like I could die at any moment. It's terrifying. It's literal terror. And it took me years to get the courage to use the word torture. I'm like, I think I could actually use that word. It took me years to say that out loud to somebody else. Like, can I use that word for what I went through? Like torture? Like, it's not just schizophrenia, but many mental illness, any disease, I believe, where people are, it makes people want to end their life or think about ending their life. That's, to me, that's just torture. So anyway, it's to answer your question, I think people could see even people who couldn't read emotion or didn't have much emotional intelligence could probably see there was something wrong with me. I never displayed sort of very bizarre, erratic behavior. I appeared different. I got a job with doing data entry in an office, and after being there for a number of years, people would say, some people knew, people coming in would say, Matthew, I didn't even know you had anything wrong with you when I told them I had schizophrenia. So, but I could feel differences in me, even in the last few years. I would just do things differently. Just my eye movements would be different.
A lot of the kids I've worked with over the years who have been diagnosed schizophrenic or been told that what they're experiencing schizophrenic, I have never heard one explain it in the way that you have. I've always heard it explained. I hear voices, the voices tell me to do things. I have, visions, and the visions, scare me. That they, distinct hallucinations. And one of the things about schizophrenia that is difficult for someone who doesn't know about the experience is that it just doesn't seem real. There's an unreasonable experience that they're having that defies logic. I remember working with a guy in a hospital. I was a security officer at the time. This is many, many years ago, back in the early 90s. And he was a schizophrenic who had come in a couple times. And I ended up on a on a patient watch, also as a suicide watch with him. And all he could see were the little blue doctors. And he said the hats were like what the Vietnamese would wear during the war. And he was a Vietnam vet. And they were searching for him. They were chasing him around. And the police officer had brought him into the facility with lights and sirens. He ducked into the room and he was freaking out. They're going to find me. And I said to him, the x-ray room has lead walls. Let's go hide in there. And he was like, great idea. And I got permission from the ER staff. We went and hid in the x-ray room and he was able to fall asleep. None of it was real. My solution was not a real suggestion. What he was experiencing was not real, but you couldn't convince him in that. And in talking with the psychiatrist later, asking him if it was okay that I played along with him, the answer that the psychiatrist gave was temporarily yes, as a crutch to protect him in the time being until we get his meds stabilized. Yes. But for the long term, no. So there's an unreasonable nature and in that situation and scenario, an unreasonable intervention to dealing with this. Once you understood what you had, you still sound like you can talk about it with the mind of an engineer, that this became another project for you to, this complication became an equation for you to solve. How did everybody else in your life solve it? How did family do? How did friends do as they began to learn that there was an unreasonable struggle going on inside of you that you were hiding from people?
Well, first off, hallucinations happen in 75% of people with schizophrenia. I was in the 25% that don't have hallucinations.
Is there
Those
a reason for that you found out? Sorry to interrupt. I'm just
uh,
curious. Do you know why, or is that just kind of a
no,
random die throw?
I don't know. I've just read that as stats. I'm not an official mental health expert in anything. The only official certification I do have is an engineering degree. So anyone listening, be skeptical of what I'm talking about, because I'm trying to be honest with what I know, but I could be wrong about something.
Spoken like a true engineer, sir. Be skeptical and find out for yourself. I love it.
So friends and family. The hopelessness, the helplessness of the disease. You're sitting there feeling that pain all day long and you're thinking, well, what can I do to stop it? What can I do? What can I do? And you just feel so helpless. And the people around you, for me, I just felt like they felt helpless. Like there's nothing we can do. We just have to sit here and watch this poor person, our family member, friend, whatever, just suffer. What can we do to stop it right now? Well, what can we do? What can we do? It's a long-term game. There is a schizophrenia advocate in Saskatchewan, Canada, who's in her mid-20s, and she's doing remarkably well. She's doing things that I couldn't do in my mid-20s. And so I just want to offer that up. There is hope. There's an article online, and I haven't been able to find it again. The head of the Canadian Schizophrenia Society told me about it. It's called The Seven Myths of Schizophrenia, and one of them is that a myth is that it's a lifelong disease. Well, the disease can leave in your 40s, 50s, later on in life. I don't know the exact decade, but around there. And I know the mathematician John Nash in the movie A Beautiful Mind, his disease left later in life. He was able to get back into some of his math stuff that he was doing. Friends and family, like I said, you get a very helpless feeling. For me, one of the big things that people could have done for me, and for parents out there who are wondering what they can do, is simply just be there with them, spend time with them, spend time with them. I know they may want to be off by themselves, and sometimes I wanted to be by myself too. But I found in talking to them, some being able to. A lot of people think, well, I just can't have this conversation with somebody because they've gone through war or cancer, and I just don't know how to have this deep intellectual, soul searching conversation with them because I'm not comfortable with that. I don't know how to deal with that. It scares people, I think, a lot of people. And there's a book, and it talks about how when horrible things happen to people fall into two categories. They want to talk about it all the time, or they never want to talk about it. And I fell into the category of wanting to talk about it a lot. And for people who don't want to talk about it, you have to respect that.
Yeah.
Um, I so for people, so what I wanted to do was I wanted to talk about my symptoms. I didn't want to talk about all these deep soul searching sort of stuff about me, but I wanted to talk about my symptoms. And yes, some symptoms were tough. Like, what's it like to, feel suicidal? And well,
Yeah.
I had no problem talking about that. I still don't. And I want to encourage people to have conversations and just listen, and not, and if you feel afraid, just go through it. Just keep going. You might find you have one of the best conversations of your life.
I think that having conversations, real conversations, honest, heartfelt, connected conversations about suicide saves lives every single day.
The other thing with schizophrenia, sorry to interrupt, is that one of the symptoms, and it was that I've read, and it was true for me, is difficulty self-directing, let alone other directing. It was hard for me to ask other people what to give me what I needed and wanted. And if nobody brought it up, and I didn't mention it, then I never got that from other people. I don't
Hmm.
know if other people knew that I wanted to have more conversations about what I was going through. I didn't know if people knew that I wanted to spend more time with them. And I walk into a room just barely being able to just tie my shoes and sit down and watch TV. That was a real chore, let alone say to other people, look, this has to be done, this has to be done, this has to be done to help me. I couldn't do that. It was so hard to ask for.
What is it about schizophrenia that makes something like tying your shoes, walking into a room, sitting down in a chair so difficult? Like, what is going on that's making these things unreasonable in the moment?
I was being bombarded by visual and audio stimuli. Everything
Okay.
was just, I just, like I said, it's like being shot at. It felt like your fingers, for example, if you just, when you're using your hands all day long, you're
Yeah.
picking up a glass of water or whatever, just to pick up a glass of water, you do so many. If you monitored and looked at all the ways you could pick up a glass of water with your hand, it's infinite. The way each knuckle in each finger in relation to each other, how you, you can't see it on video for those. But if you just wiggle your fingers all over the place, you don't even really know what your hands are doing. You just sort of wiggle them. You can't even describe it. But for me, with schizophrenia, it felt like I had to think about how to move each knuckle in relation to each knuckle in each finger to pick up a
Fascinating.
glass of water. It was overwhelming. I'm like, I don't know how to do this. It felt like my body was so hard to move. The one single thing I did every day, the hardest thing every day, was to simply lift the sheets off me, get out of bed, and get onto the floor and start moving and starting my day. It was unbelievable. The battle in my head to get out of bed was so difficult. And just to lift sheets off you.
I have to say, Matthew, there's a way you're talking about this that just evokes my compassion for you. And so many people who are living with a loved one who deals with schizophrenia finds themselves in an environment, in a moment it can shift sometimes, but of chaos. Again, and there's what we're talking about is not a reasonable experience. And that's why people trying to use reason and logic to say, Matthew, just sit down and put your shoes on. Like, what are you're making a big deal out of this? That's your own frustration speaking. That has no benefit whatsoever to someone who whose brain is acting in a relentless manner of bombardment of information like this. Like, I feel like you're explaining it in such a way that makes me go, God, how can I help you? And is this because of your engineering skill that you've been able to, dissolve and dilute this down and separate these components so that you can understand them, or is this just your nature of being able to communicate? Like, is this a learned skill to be able to get me to understand what you went through?
It may just be innate in me. I don't know. I've got a family member from the vaudeville era, many decades ago, who entertained tens of thousands of troops daily. He was an entertainer. I don't know if I've got some sort of communication to other people from him, I have no idea. I
Well,
really
I'm
don't.
waiting for a joke or something here now. Like if this is no. So, last question I have about the schizophrenia, and this is just absolutely fascinating, but I do want to move forward into the now of what you've got going on with Mind Aid because it is remarkable. And most important, I think what you're doing now is that ray of hope with everything you can communicate. What you do now expresses, hey, you can succeed. Like this is not a death sentence. This is not some tattoo across your forehead. This is whatever you want it to be, and whatever you want to do can be separate. And I love that. So I want to get to that. My final question about this is one of the struggles when dealing with a loved one who's working with schizophrenia is the medication aspect. The when they feel better, they stop taking the meds, which of course allows the condition to reemerge and begin to take over and perhaps let chaos reign again. Did you ever have that struggle? Did you find a way around that struggle? Is there some engineering logic that you can give to family members to help keep their loved ones on this medication? Because what I do know about schizophrenia from the doctors, the psychiatrists who I've interviewed over the years, is that schizophrenia is one of those that must be managed with medication, as well as skills, as well as, the physical and the spiritual and the emotional. That mental piece needs to be, that brain chemistry needs to be assisted with medication. Do you believe that? And did you struggle with saying, I'm better now, I'm not taking my meds, and then have the condition return with an aggression?
At 22, after recently biking across Canada and wanting to do more fun stuff like that in my life, to all of a sudden have a disease and have to be on a medication, and plus to be so unbelievably depressed when you get that diagnosis, and the having to be on a pill felt like a ball and a chain. What? I'm 22. I've got to be on a medication, and I couldn't think positively about it. I was thinking negatively, like, oh my gosh, this means I can't do this. I can't go these places. What, blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, I'm like, well, what can I do to get myself better? Well, medication. So I was like, get that pill into me. It was this real love, hate relationship with, oh my gosh, a pill? Really? Really? At 22? Anyway, I'm like, nope, get it into me. And I waited all day long to take my pill. I never felt good until just in the last few years or so. It's and now that I'm feeling good, um, you're gonna have a hard time getting me off my medication. It's over my dead body. You're gonna have to kill me if you want me to take me off my meds.
Wow. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
you've said such a massive thing there because for so long you talk about that suicidality, and to say now to get you off your med is over your dead body. I mean, quite frankly, that just might be accurate. Do you have a question about medication and moving past it in your 40s and 50s like they say you can? Will you mask and miss an opportunity to leave it behind, or will you know when you don't need if you don't need meds anymore?
I've been so terrified just from the disease for so many years. It's that's probably years in the future, or until they find a cure, because you never know. They found some recent things on dementia that will really help people. You have no idea what the future will bring. So I try to give two messages to people. For one, who've never been through schizophrenia or mental illness, how unbelievably difficult it is. But I also want to say that you can get through it. It seems impossible. It's like being asked to run 100 meters in 4 seconds. The world record is about 9 seconds. It's like, what? I've got to do what today? What? That's not humanly possible to do. But yet you do it anyway. Somehow inside you, you find the strength, the energy to just keep going. Navy SEALs are taught in their training they are capable of 20 times more than they think they are. And I felt like I was tested that same way. Like, what? I've got to keep going and keep going and keep going. Yes. And for people going through the disease, the early part of the disease for me was difficult. But if I knew that a little bit down the road in the next so many years that the pain would lessen to a more manageable level, it would allow me to just keep going and keep going for so much longer than I thought. I noticed an improvement in my health every single week for 27 years. February 11th, 2021, my symptoms stopped. The next year and a half or so, I was in a sort of a state of shock, just sort of processing stuff. The last couple of years or so, I've had full, complete thoughts that don't go round and round in circles and don't go anywhere. And I get to think and reflect and pause. I get to just enjoy life. I have ups and downs in my day. Sometimes I might get frustrated or depressed or stressed or whatever, but it's in the normal range of emotions what I had as a kid in my youth. It's so yes, I take a pill. I keep taking it. But other than that, and trying to live a healthy lifestyle, which everyone should do anyway, I'm not cured. I use the word or phrase successfully recovered, but but isn't the ultimate solution for anything just to pop a pill and you're better? I feel good. I take my medication, and it's now taking a pill for years. Taking a pill is just no biggie for me. In the early years, it was like, oh my gosh, a pill. Now it's just like, oh, whatever. Just it's fine. Life moves on. It's not a big deal. I pop a pill and I'm fine. Half the planet's on pills, isn't aren't they?
At brabapp.com, parents, I have posted a parenting masterclass. Before you fast forward through this commercial, give me a chance because I'm going to keep it short. I'm going to keep it blunt. This is a Telly award winning parenting masterclass, highest quality filming that we could accomplish. The content is everything I have ever taught a parent in the past 20 years of working with parents in crisis. There are 3 components to the course, 56 classes in 3 components: the red, the beyond risk, the crisis children; yellow, the at risk children; and green, when things are going well, how do we get them to go great or keep them going well? It's everything I've ever taught a parent in 20 years of working with families. But here's the deal. It's $99. I want every parent to be able to have access to this course. So please go to brabapp.com, B-R-A-B for Beyond Risk and Back. brabapp.com, brabapp.com. Check it out for yourself. Let's get back to Matthew. You have probably had one of the most successful experiences of schizophrenia that I have heard of and seen. I haven't seen them all, and I'm sure there are plenty of doctors and psychiatrists who would love to talk to you, as well as say, oh, well, that's nothing. I had a patient that there's a spectrum of recovery and healing and understanding and engineering of what you've been dealing with. But for the life of me, what I don't see is how you went from this self-assessment and understanding to the awareness, recognition, and then taking on the battle of making sure everybody has access to healthcare. You say on your website, on the front page of mindaid.ca, you say over 270 million people in developing countries have no mental health care. And I love what you said earlier about, that pill felt like a ball and chain, because we're talking about break the chains. You say hashtag break the chains, and you show a person in chains, and certainly mental health issues feel like this ball and chain, that your freedom is limited because of these mental health issues that you're dealing with. How did you get from your own experience to really working towards finding support for everybody, 270 million people who are going through this? How did this come about?
My heart always went out to people in war-torn countries, extreme poverty, who had mental illness to go through as well. I went through mental illness in Canada with a so-so mental health care system, but one of the better ones in the world.
Yes.
and I and I was just barely getting through. Like I said, that lady said I looked like I was walking through a war zone, through a world of flying glass. And but for some reason, I don't know why, I never looked up any content on mental health in developing countries. In 2017 or so, TED Talk appeared on my screen in a Google something, and it was about Vikram Patel, who was the first person to make basic mental health care for people in developing countries. And I started looking up the cause, and I found that there are groups helping. There are groups helping people get basic mental health care. These models are low cost, proven effective, and scalable. And the World Health Organization is trying to figure out the best way to roll them out to the masses. In the meantime, these groups have been helping for years, getting thousands of people basic mental health care, getting them back up on their feet, being able to feed their families. What my website is, it's the world's first website with all these groups helping the cause on one site. The groups are scattered across the web, and I've put them all together on one site. If people want to know how to help, where to go, MindAid is a great place to start. I keep finding groups as time goes on that I haven't heard of before, and I'm very proud of that. So I made the website in 2018, and it's because for years I thought, well, if I was going to help people once I got better, I thought, well, I'd be helping people in Canada or wherever. But when I started learning that so many people had no mental health care, I thought, well, I need to be helping people who need it the most. So yeah, it begs the question, well, what about cancer? Who's helping people with cancer and mental
Right.
health,
Right.
or people in developing countries, or you name all the other disorders we've got here, they've got them too, and more of them too. Yeah, it just sort of naturally evolved. I read books for years on how to get myself better. And then around 2010 or so, I started reading books on how to do public speaking, advocacy, fundraising, making websites, social media, running a nonprofit, all those sorts of things from 2010 and on. It wasn't until like 2018 that I started to be able to put those into practice. A lady I know, her mom had a stroke at, a, at an old age, and she walked out of the hospital very soon, pretty much 100%. And the doctor said she had a reader's brain. I read voraciously. I read so many books. That was one thing that helped me. And anyway, I'm trying to help people. There are 10 nonprofits that I've found that you can donate to help people with mental illness in developing countries. I'm encouraging people to donate to them or at least talk about this. I think the biggest thing you can do to help this cause is simply talk about it and have conversations about it. It can happen in a very short conversation. Just mention mental health in developing countries. People get the idea pretty quickly. We know about building schools, drilling wells. We've known about that for decades. Just throw in mental health. Now that we can talk about mental health for the last so many years, we're talking about it so much more. It's easy to throw into a conversation with a stranger at the grocery store. I do it all the time. Just throw it in. Send them to MindAid as one thing you can do. Send them to MindAid to learn more.
It's incredible. Your website, first of all, is an absolute, I'll dare to use the word, overwhelm of resources. The books that you're suggesting people read, the websites that you have, the places, the resources, the it's phenomenal. It also speaks that, is this your full-time work now? Is this what you do, or you still work as an engineer and this is your labor of love?
I never actually took a job as an engineer. It was too stressful for me. I did data entry in the office for like 20 years. But the last 5 years or so, I'm wanting to make a mental health advocacy, this platform, my thing. And I'm trying to find a way to do it full time. So I've got a job, a regular job, uh, in the meantime, doing something else. But I want to be speaking. I love being up on camera, up on stage and screen. I want to be doing more of that. I'm on YouTube and TikTok and many other social platforms. People can feel free to reach out to me. I've got on my website, there's a button there and some links to it's a list of my best mental health tips. And I really encourage people to go there. There's some of the books that have helped me so much. I've read hundreds of books on how to get myself better. There's some resources there for schizophrenia. Anosognosia is when people don't believe they're sick. There's a man, Dr. Javier Amador, who has a TED Talk on how to help deal with that. There's a lady in Canada, in Alberta, a YouTuber, Lauren Kennedy. She's got schizophrenia. Her YouTube channel is Living Well with Schizophrenia. I really recommend that. Lots of great resources there. There's a lady in New York City, Cecilia McGow. She has a TED Talk called "I Am Not a Monster: Schizophrenia," and she has a nonprofit called Students with Psychosis, and it helps people with psychosis or schizophrenia. I want to do something, and I've brought this up with Cecilia, and I haven't pursued it yet, but she said it sounds like a good idea. When COVID hit, students with psychosis started posting videos or photos of their group Zooms with their advocates from all over the world. And for the first time in my life, at the age of like late 40s, I saw people with the same thing as me. I hadn't seen that. I've met
Hmm.
hardly anybody in my life with schizophrenia, a handful of people. We all hide. We're not loud and proud about it. And seeing these dozens and dozens and dozens of people, students so young in their 20s, with the same thing as me, I'm like, wow, this is what we look like. This is what we look like. And I want to make a video or a series of videos just showing photos of people with schizophrenia and these advocates for with students with psychosis. They were saying, hi, I'm studying this at university. I'm taking astronomy, wide range of interests, wide range of personalities. And it's just like, wow. And they all looked so normal. They didn't have horns coming out of their head or, pitchfork tails. We weren't the devil. Like they just looked like random everyday people. It's like, wow. It was incredible for me. How about a nice coffee table book? Photos, nice, beautiful photos of people with schizophrenia. This is what we look like. This is what we look like. So these are some ideas. I hope someday that might happen because we are not represented in the media a lot. We a few little things, will be talked about a lot, but I didn't even know what we looked like in movies and dementia. For decades, we see people with dementia in the movies, perhaps portrayed inaccurately, a senile older person and fumbles along, but we know what they
Criminal.
look like. Yeah.
Yeah, they're criminal. The woman from Homeland, they talk about her. That was part of her diagnosis of schizophrenia that she had to hide from. It's not represented. Is it understood? Do you feel like you understand it? Do you feel like the people that you rely on for medical support truly understand what schizophrenia is?
I'm interested too because I still online I'm loud and proud about schizophrenia. I say it, people can find it. When I'm in public and there are strangers around me, still to this day, I whisper the word schizophrenia if there's anyone around me because I don't want them to hear me utter that word. It's this visceral reaction to me to just whisper that word in public because are
Sure.
people going to take me away, lock me up, say I'm a serial killer? It's people with schizophrenia are no more prone to violence than the rest of the general population. One stat is 2% of the general population is violent. It's the same for people with schizophrenia. 2% are violent. The British Columbia Schizophrenia Society says people who are untreated with mental illness can have a higher rate of violence than the general population. I don't know what that rate is, and I want to find it out. I don't know if it's like 3% or 10%. I don't know what it is, but bottom line is there are millions of us around the world who are not violent, and and it's like, wow, it's tough. It's just one more thing you have to go through all day long for years is what do people think of me when I walk into a room? And I hate it. And it's like saying, look out for those left-handed people. They could kill you. Lock them up. It's I know that's not 100% accurate, but it's darn close to just being ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. And if we can be out in public showing ourselves, saying, look, hi, I'm Matthew. I've been working in your office for 20 years. Hi, I'm Matthew. I'm in your whatever club. Hi, I'm Matthew. You've been running my groceries to the grocery store for years. I'm fine. I'm not going to hurt you. um, for parents, I'm just gonna for parents, make us laugh, tell me jokes. It's there's a documentary called Laughology by Al Narenberg, and he says 80% of the population has chronic seriousness. This is a lesson for everybody. Try to tell jokes. We all have a sense of humor, But how often do you go out of your way to tell jokes to other people, to make other people laugh? That's my challenge to anybody. Parents with someone with schizophrenia, can you make me laugh? Tell me a joke. They say the family that plays together stays together. Try to have some fun. I can laugh and joke even in my worst years. I was, if you told me a joke, I'd laugh. It's dance. Put on some music and dance. There's a study in New York City years ago that said dancing was one of the best defenses for dementia. Dancing's great for the brain, and have fun. And I know it's tough. I know you may be just run ragged looking after your schizophrenic child, adult child, or young adult child. Hang in there. Be there for them when things get tough. Just keep being there for them, even when they don't want to talk to you. Just don't cut them out of your life if you can. I can't. I don't have kids myself. I don't know what it's like to raise kids, but here I am, just another voice on the planet, encouraging you to just hang in there. It's and your kid today doesn't necessarily have to be how he is or she is years from now. Joe Roberts, he pushed a shopping cart across Canada for youth homelessness. He had issues and homelessness and mental illness when he was a kid. You see photos of him in his 20s. He looked disheveled and not doing well at all. You see him now, business person, suit and tie, public speaker. That's not even for mental illness. People, whenever anybody today is not going to be the same person years from now. And you may think, well, my child, it's going to be the same way forever, but things change. And I don't want to sugarcoat things and say, I know I can't help everybody on the planet. I know, but I still have to give a message of hope, because you don't know what's going to happen. No one knows. The future is not written. The future is not written.
So that's my conversation with Matthew. I think you understand now, listening, having heard. I think you understand. I'm at a loss for words, which people who have listened to the 260 episodes of Beyond Risk and Back understand that's very rare. But he has a way about him, and what he's doing at mindaid.ca. You've got to go be a part of it. Go watch his YouTube videos, share them. If you want to understand compassion, then really go back and listen to what he said about what it was like. There's a purity to the way he talks about this experience that allows you to reach out over these digital ones and zeros and touch into something that your child may be going through that's causing the chaos in your home, or the misunderstanding in your home, or the fights and the arguments and the craziness and the fear. And ultimately, what he's saying is that this can get better. And on mindaid.ca, he's got so many resources. This can get better. I want to thank Deepen Productions for the hard work on this episode and every episode I do, and the awesome music of Beyond Risk and Back. Parents, take care of yourselves first. Take care of your adult relationships second, and then go take care of your children third. Because in that way, you'll do your best work with your children. I'm Aaron Huey. I'll see you next time on Beyond Risk and Back.